Hi, I'm Dave Schenkel, and I have a story that I want to share with you. And the reason that I share it with people is it starts with me being 20 years old, and something bad happened in my family, and I was mad at God for a long time, and it's just a really bad place to be stuck. And so sharing this story, I feel, could help gets other people out of that spot if you had something bad happen in your life. So anyway, I grew up on a farm 7 miles northeast of Utica, South Dakota, and I was the second oldest of 7 children. We were just 2 miles from the Martinez Lutheran Church, where I was baptized and confirmed. And when I was 20 years old, I moved to Tyndall, South Dakota, and joined the St. John's Lutheran Church in Tyndall, and when I moved to Tyndall, we lived just a couple miles out of town on a farm. And anyway, the when I was 20 years old, the story starts in 1978, and my youngest brother got sick with the type of leukemia with no hope for a cure at that time. He fought it for almost 2 years and died just before his 12th birthday. For many years I had feelings of anger, asking why would God let a child die, especially that way. During the time my brother was ill, I had gotten married, and soon Mary and I started a family, and by 1983 we had 3 boys, and everything was going well. But in 1990 I felt that something was wrong, and I decided to go and get my first physical. And this was really our first miracle, that something kept poking and prodding me and made me do this. And anyway, the doctor told me I was in great shape, so I went home and told Mary that she should go for a checkup too. My feeling that something was wrong had Mary worried too, because by the time her appointment date came, she had noticed that she would feel lightheaded when she would do something physically strenuous. And so when the doctor told her she was okay, she did not believe him, and so the doctor ordered more blood work, and she waited for the results, and they found that her blood counts were very low. So they sent her to the cancer specialist in the same building the same day, and they checked her bone marrow and saw that she had leukemia. So all in one day in 1990, our world turned upside down. It happened to be the day before Good Friday. That night I had to go to our church to hang a banner that Mary had made for Easter. And I had made a bracket to hold the banner, and so I took my boots off and stood on top of the pulpit. And this was in the old wooden church before St. John's moved to their new building. And anyway, I had to drill a couple holes up there and mount this bracket. And while I was doing all that, I was thinking about how I was going to handle this. And I gathered up my tools and stood at the bottom of the steps below the altar and where you'd receive communion. And with tears running down my face, I prayed that God would cure her or take her quickly, because I didn't want her to suffer the way my brother did. Mary was home packing, as we had to leave early for Omaha early on Good Friday for tests. By Easter the tests were over, and she was admitted to the Nebraska Medical Center for high-dose chemotherapy, the first step to getting a bone marrow transplant. It was hard convincing Mary that all this was the right thing to do, as her doctor at home told her she probably could not beat this, and she could have just stayed home to live out the time she had left. But I convinced her that she had to try for me and the boys. During her first high-dose treatment, which we were told would mean about 30 days in the hospital, there was a complication. She got aspergillus, which is like mold, and it grows in the lungs when there is little or no white blood cells to eat up infections. And this surgery involved making an incision from your sternum all the way around to your backbone between the ribs. And then, if you can picture the shape of a lung, they had to cut out a pie-shaped piece out of the center of the lung and then stitch that lung back together and everything else that they had opened up. And this was a major surgery for anyone, but very dangerous with the low blood counts. She was on a breathing machine for about a week, but she made it. Everyone was amazed. It was our second miracle. By now I was convinced God was going to cure her. After each round, she got to come home for 3 weeks to get her strength back before going for another round of chemotherapy. And between treatments, they harvested some of her bone marrow, and the way they explained it, they cleaned it up and then they froze it, stored it to give back to her after her final treatment. And after the second treatment, a tooth became abscessed and had to be removed. This also could have been very serious. The third treatment would be fatal if you did not have a bone marrow transplant to start your body's ability to grow its own blood cells, as the treatment is so strong that it kills everything good and bad in the bone marrow. During this round, she had to have her gallbladder removed. And during this process, a common cold could kill you. So outside each patient's room, there was a sink out in the hall with a little cabinet with supplies in it. And you had to scrub your hands and put on boot covers and wear masks while you were in the room. And this was for everyone, the doctors and visitors and anyone who came in and out of the room. And anyway, she finished that third round of chemotherapy, and she got her bone marrow transplant, and after about a month her blood counts came back up, and by Halloween we were going home with the cure with no medications needed. And then we had to go back to Omaha for checkups every month, and then after a year's time, they said it's very unlikely that the leukemia will come back. And so they changed the checkups to every 6 months. But in July of 1995, the leukemia did return, a side effect of the drugs that saved her the first time, they told us. This time they said would be more risky because her heart and other organs were already damaged from the first chemotherapy treatments, and also this time would be more dangerous because we had to use a donor, and they couldn't find as close a match as we would like to see. And anyway, they started the whole process, and this time there were no major complications, but at the final treatment, her body rejected the bone marrow transplant, and she had to go start taking dialysis when her kidneys failed, and then she was placed on a breathing machine because she was really getting run down, and they were giving her anti-rejection drugs, and the hope was that the rejection drugs would kick in, and so they put her on a breathing machine, so then there was no more way of communicating with her because she was too weak to write. And anyway, she one day the doctors came in and they thought she had had a stroke because they'd shine the light in her eyes and she was kind of unresponsive, and but she was on this breathing machine, so we just had to ride it out. But anyway, the final treatment and this ordeal here with what I'm explaining lasted for about 9 weeks, but on November 9th of 1995 she died, and it was just 5 years and a matter of days after she had gotten out with the cure in 1990. But this time I wasn't angry. I was focusing on the gift of the 5 years she had gotten to raise the boys. She had taught us how to do all the household tasks, and everything we needed to know the first time she got to come home in 1990. These little boys knew how to do laundry and cook and all sorts of things. I became the bookkeeper for my shop, which she had done for me. And she had made us strong and self-sufficient. So I was thankful for all that. And anyway, Mary had always kept a Bible in her, near her hospital bed. It was a self-study version, and it was very hard for me to read, so I started bringing the Gideon New Testament from my hotel room and found it written simply and easy to understand. When I could see Mary was slipping away, I felt I had to do something special to comfort Mary. Her favorite Bible verse was Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31, and it goes like this: Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired and weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And one that I found that was really fitting and comforting for me was Psalm 23. And I would read both of these to her every hour or two when it got close to the end, and they were a great comfort to me too. The Psalm 23 is, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Anyway, then a couple of days after Mary was gone, the boys and I went to Avon to order flowers for the funeral. We also visited Pastor Phillips to talk about the services. He also lived in Avon. And he told us of a visit that he had at our house with Mary after the 1990 illness. Mary asked the pastor if he believed God talks to people, and he said, of course, through the Bible. And she said, no, I mean really talks to people. Then she told the pastor that God had told her during those tough times in 1990 that he would give her 5 more years. I was shocked and so relieved. I had locked onto the thinking that Mary's in heaven and it's okay that she had to die, even if we don't understand why. But now with this news, there was no doubt she had to be in heaven, and it truly was a miracle that she had survived the 1990 illness. She knew all along and used the time wisely to teach the boys and me, helping in our church and community and trying to make things better. Looking back, God's plan seems clear. Our boys would have lost their mother at ages 6, 8, and 10 if she had died in 1990. Those 5 years were an amazing gift to us, and all this can strengthen our faith and bring others to faith who have not believed in God. Miracles are all around us, and we just need to look for them and be thankful for the blessings that God sends us every day. And don't ask why when bad things happen. And that's kind of the end of the original story, but I have a little more to add to it here. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was sharing a memory with these 3 boys that are well grown up now, and the subject of this story came up, and one of the boys finally told me, he said, "I don't believe that story. Mom would have told us about that, and she would have never kept that from us. The pastor must have made that up." And I says, "No, I can see why she would keep that from us." But he was still convinced that his mother would have told him, and so I thought about it for a few days afterwards, and I thought if Mary had ever told anyone, it would be her best friend who lived just 3 miles from our house. So I contacted her and told her about the whole situation, and she said, yeah, we were on our way to a craft fair, and Mary told me that she believed God was going to give her 5 more years. And so then I shared that with my son, and what I've been sharing with you all the while here is a book that my son made then with pictures of the timeline of all this happening. And it's a lot easier to read than my handwriting, which is what I got to read now for the last final closing of the story. So now it's March of 2022, and I've been trying to come up with a way to wrap this all up. As I told Pastor Johnson at my church in Avon, where I go now, that I would tell this story in place of a sermon if he ever needed someone to fill in for him in a pinch. And the day is almost here, so lucky for me, the answer came in one of his sermons. He told a story about a little girl who had lots of temper tantrums. And finally her mother told her to go outside and pound a nail in the fence every time she got mad. Some days multiple nails were pounded. Soon the nail pounding became less and less, and one day the little girl told her mom that I didn't have to pound any nails today. So the mother told her that you can pull a nail every day that you don't get mad. And as time passed, the little girl told her mother, all the nails are gone. And so the mother said, well, let's go look. And they went out to where the little girl had done all the pounding, and the mother says, but look at all the holes, the fence will never be the same. And the point of the story is that when we get mad and say hurtful things to other people or blame them for our problems, it's going to leave a mark. And sometimes that mark might not ever go away. And that's exactly what I did to God when I blamed him for what happened to my brother. It hit me like a ton of bricks when Pastor Johnson told this story about the nails. But God apparently forgave me anyway, because he answered my prayer and gave us the 5 more years, so that now at age 64 I finally feel I have complete closure, going back 44 years to when my brother had his illness. Anger only makes things worse, and we need to trust in God, and he will show us the way to go on. Thank you, and I hope that hearing this story helps you if you get in a bad spot.